Hello everybody, this is ManuS and welcome to another MTG Arena Contenders video series here on my channel. Last time we talked about mono blue tempo, and today I got another sweet potential contender for you that I want to share with you in the new Ravnica Allegiance standard. And it is a mono red Arclight Phoenix deck. So before we dive into the deck list, as usual, you know the drill. Hit the subscribe button, turn on the notifications icon to not miss out on future content, and please consider whitelisting YouTube on your adblock to help support the free content. Alright, on to the deck. Okay, so this is the deck. First of all, we have 8/1 mana red cantrips for Crashthrough for Warlord's Fury. They're first and foremost here because they are 1 mana cantrips that cycle for Field, Steam-Kin, Guttersnipe, and Phoenix for all the creatures in the deck. Basically, they synergize with all of them. Then we have some 1 mana burn spells in Shock and Skewer the Critics, which is more often than not a 1 mana burn spell in this deck. It's very important to have a lot of 1 mana cards in this deck, both to get back Arclight Phoenix as well as charging up Steam-Kin. Basically, if you use 3 1 mana spells to charge this up, you can just make 3 mana again and rinse repeat basically for free. So having a low curve is very important. Also obviously for Field and Guttersnipe to just kind of play a lot of spells in one turn. And yeah, Shock and Skewer the Critics are the ones that work best here. Lightning Strike is a bit clunky and doesn't replace itself, so it works worse with the 2 spells matter damage creatures and Phoenix. And yeah, Wizard's Lightning doesn't really work in a deck with 0 wizards, because then it costs 3 and that is a pretty bad rate for a constructed card. And last but not least, in the 1 mana department, basically as card draw, we have Light Up the Stage, our 1 red, draw 2, which is really powerful, especially for standard, and one of the cards that helps make a deck like this possible to give you enough gas both to return Phoenix and to fuel these damage creatures. Then we have an additional draw spell in Tormenting Voice, also our best way to get value out of Arclight Phoenix, because you can just discard it to it and then get it back for free. And it also allows us to get rid of spare lands that we might draw into. Then we have the creatures that I talked about. For Electrostatic Field and for Guttersnipe, provide additional damage sources without attacking. And Steam-Kin is just a really powerful 2-drop that also has great synergy with the deck's desire to play as many spells as possible in one turn, thanks to its ability. And then we have the 4 Arclight Phoenix as threat. The deck plays them a fair share of the time just for 4 mana, and then gets them back once they die, but that's totally fine. And last but not least, we have 1 risk factor. Other lists I've seen have like 20 lands. I feel like that is too much with how many cards you see, how much you cycle. You're going to flood out a lot. I played similar mono red lists with 18 lands, and I would probably consider even cutting down to 18 lands for a second risk factor. I do not own a second risk factor at the moment, and I'm not 100% sure, which is why I didn't go for it. Also, as you can see, I don't have a rare wildcard, but it is probably ideal to cut 1 more land for a risk factor, since it plays really well. It gives you additional ways to discard Phoenix for free, and potential ways to either deal a lot of damage or draw cards, depending on what is less bad for the opponent, but both are going to be pretty bad for the opponent usually in this deck. Which is why the card is quite playable, even though it's a Punisher card, which usually is a bad thing. And the fact that it has Jumpstart is a big part of it, because basically dealing 8 damage with 1 card, turning spare lands or Phoenixes into deal 4 or draw 3 is really, really powerful, especially when you have Steam-Kin to make additional mana. The question is, we obviously have to compare this to your typical mono red. Mono red is a bit more powerful for sure, and also a lot faster and more explosive, but it is also kind of easier to shut down and fight, and people are fighting it more and more. And this seems like it could be better against the decks that are trying to fight mono red, especially with like life gain and kind of going over the top, especially slower mid-range decks and controlling decks like, I don't know, Golgari or rather Sultai mid-range now splashing for Krasis, or the various control decks that are pretty well prepared for the typical mono red, but have a much harder time shutting down Phoenix recursion and having enough spot removal to kill these Guttersnipes and fields and stuff, especially if you don't attack, because cards like Seal Away then don't really work. So you might want to consider not attacking with your Guttersnipe against white control decks for that reason and stuff like that. And yeah, this deck is much more grindy and has much higher long-term damage output than mono red, making it much better at fighting attrition and life gain sources than the typical mono red. And this might be a potential alternative appeal of for this deck over mono red. It is certainly much worse in the mirror, not to say it is actually pretty bad in the mirror, because you're kind of slow and they just run you over and out-tempo you. So that is definitely a problem. So if you still face a lot of mono red aggro, you might want to avoid this. But if you face a lot of decks that are trying to fight mono red, are prepared for mono red, gate control, and various Teferi based control decks, this seems like a great option. Like, for example, I don't see how something like Burnt Fog, like Turbo Nexus, is realistically beating all this stuff, because you have so much damage that is really explosive, that they cannot interact with their fogs and stuff, and they have no way of dealing with a Guttersnipe. You just play a Guttersnipe. Like if you go like turn 2 Steam-Kin, turn 3 Guttersnipe, they just die on turn 4 and there's nothing they can do about it, for example. So that's kind of the appeal of this deck. Currently I'm not sure how good it is, but that's the theory at least, and kind of its potential place in the metagame cycle. Yeah, I think the deck is kind of interesting and kind of cool, so I wanted to share it with you and show it off. And as you all full well know, my card pool is still quite limited, so I can only build so many decks. And this is one of the decks I can build, and that is kind of interesting and cool to show off. So here you have it, mono red Phoenix. And yeah, as usual, gonna hop into 4 games with it in ranked to show it in action, show you how it plays out, and yeah, see how we're doing, and also, of course, show you how to pilot the deck, what to pay attention to. Okay, so I'll be back in a moment with game number 1. Stay tuned.